Meeting of Development Control A Committee. Thank you, councillors, officers for attending and members of the public. If you're watching at home, we don't currently have anyone in the public gallery and in City Hall. We're just going to go around in a second and do introductions, but let me just say, for safety reasons, the fire drill, if you hear a fire alarm and we have to leave, our muster point, as it were, is to go out of the main doors of City Hall, turn right and go down to next to the cathedral and wait there. We're not expecting any fire drills. We also need to, in this meeting, confirm the chair, but we'll come to that in a second. Let's just do introductions to start with. So I'll start. I'm Councillor Rob Breyer. I am the chair of the committee. And we'll just go around and do the officers and the councillors.
Steve Gregory, Democrat Services.
Councillor Eddie.
Councillor Andrew Varney, newly returned to DCA. I was on the committee for 3 years, 21 to 24.
Thank you. Patrick McAllister for Hot West and Harbside Ward. I am substituting on this committee.
Ellie Freeman, Bedminster Ward.
Councillor Izzy Russell for Ashley Ward, and I'm subbing for Serena Ralston.
Councillor Harouz Hayed Zaman Rabi, thank you.
Councillor Katia Hanshin, Brislington East Ward.
Councillor Zoe Peat, Avonmouth and Lawrence Western Ward.
Peter Sol, Urban Design Team Manager in the Planning Department.
I'm Jonathan Diamond from Development Management.
Thank you very much. So that concludes the introductions. We'll just go through the next agenda items, which are, first of all, because this is the annual general meeting of DCA, we're going to go through the confirmation of the chair, 2025-26. So you're just requested to note that I, Rob Breyer, have been appointed as the chair for this municipal year. And agenda item 3, again, you're requested to note that Katia Hornshin has been appointed as the vice chair. So hopefully we will note that. And for agenda item 4, the membership of the committee is listed in the papers. It's basically, I don't think I need to read through it, but yeah, basically you can look at that in the papers.
There is a change, isn't there?
There is one change. So Councillor George Calacioni has stepped back from the committee, resigned from the committee, and his position will be taken by Councillor Toby Wells, although Councillor Wells is not able to participate today because he hasn't quite gone through the training. So it's being substituted by Councillor McAllister. We'll come to that again in a minute, which is confusing, but it's important to clarify that here, I think. So that's just to note. Agenda item 5 is the terms of reference. We're requested to note the terms of reference for this committee. It says Development Control Committee B on my papers, but I think it should say Development Control Committee A. Has anyone got any comments on the terms of reference? Okay, we'll just note those. And agenda item 6 is the proposed dates of future meetings. Again, I won't read those out, but they span from the next meeting on the 13th of August to the 22nd of April 2026. And of course, we'll update those for the subsequent municipal year after this year. So that's just for noting. And then we get to agenda item 7, apologies for absence and substitutions. So have we got any apologies for absence and substitutions?
Well, I think it's already been done, actually. Councillor Russell is already replacing Councillor Russell, and then we've got Councillor McAllister who's replacing Toby Wells for tonight.
Thank you very much. Okay. And agenda item 8 is declarations of interest. This is to note any interests relevant to the consideration of items on the agenda. Has anyone got anything they would like to declare as an interest or any comments to make on that? Yep, Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. I represent a ward which is partly encompassed by the area of the proposed order, and I have previously encouraged people to fill it out in support, but that was it was a very minor piece of comms, and I'm very much coming into this with an open mind. I don't consider myself predetermined.
Thanks for clarifying that, Patrick. Any other comments on declarations of interest or declarations to make? Nope. Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 9, which is minutes of the previous meeting. This item is just to agree the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record. Can I take it that that is agreed? Oh, you're seconding it, Zoe? Yeah. Okay, I'll first it and you can second it. That's agreed. I think usually I sign it, but I don't think we've got a physical copy here.
I have got it with me, I'm sorry, Jack.
No worries, we'll do that at another time,
I will do
but we will do that at some point. Question 10? Agenda item 10 even. I've been reading too many quizzes recently. Agenda item 10, action sheet. There's nothing currently on the action sheet, as far as I know. So we'll move straight on to agenda item 11, which is appeals. This is to note appeals lodged, imminent public inquiries, and appeals awaiting decision. Is there anything we want to raise from this? I've got one thing I would like to say, but anything you'd like to say to start with, Jonathan? No? Okay. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Richard. Yep.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, a positive point. Over the last few months, we've seen ups and downs by the number of lost delegated decisions. Personally, I'm very pleased to see, obviously, the planning inspectorate deemed our decisions policy compliant. So I'm pleased that the endorsement rate is quite high. So that's positive. The other one may actually veer on to the issue we want to raise, actually, Chairman, about the old tavern, which we discussed recently. All I would say is I think I was the only member to vote against that, or rather in favour of this, against the officer recommendation. And at the time I did say, in my view, the recommendation, the grounds for that were the weakest I'd seen, and they were likely to be overturned at appeal. So unfortunately that seems to have happened.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, I just want to, again say about the old tavern, it is disappointing that we took an officer recommendation, which was to refuse the application. Obviously, the committee voted in majority to go along with that recommendation and refuse the application. The applicant has appealed, and that appeal has been allowed and costs awarded. We're not. I think, from my perspective, and Richard, your position might vary, but I feel like we did make a decision in good faith, and I think we made a decision with the best information we had available to us. It's just disappointing that in this instance, the planning inspector took a different view than us. And I don't think there's much more to say other than that. But yeah, go ahead if you want to.
There's a different issue on the...
Oh yeah,
this
sure,
item,
go for it. Go for it, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
So, Appeal 78 is within my ward, 59 Sylvan Way. It's an application for a lawful development certificate for proposed use of solar panels to a front-facing roof. This appeal was refused. I was just wondering if I could get some clarification.
Is there anything anyone can say about that at the moment? It's number 78 on... Yeah. If you can, then you can. If you can't, you can't, don't worry.
Oh, yeah. I'll answer it, Pete. That's okay. Yeah. So just looking at the details, I mean, it was an application for a lawful development certificate, so for a proposed use or development. So essentially, the applicant was making a submission to the planning authority to essentially seek confirmation, in this case, that the solar panels that they were looking to install would be lawful, so that they would comply with the general permitted development order. So essentially the rules around kind of what you can and can't do without planning permission. And it seems in this case it was assessed by the planning authority and it was refused. So we assessed it and concluded that we weren't able to grant the certificate. It seems that they have appealed against that, and that appeal has also been dismissed as well, which would suggest, well, whilst I don't have the decision notice to hand, that the inspectorate were also of the view that it wouldn't have been lawful.
Thank you. So just to clarify, it would have been unlawful for this property to have solar panels on the roof?
Only in terms of kind of what they were proposing based on the evidence that they provided with this application. It may well be the case that, you know, if they were able to, amend it potentially, then they may then be able to come up with a compliant proposal. But I wouldn't be able to say that for certain without kind of looking at the details. But there are permitted development rights that exist for domestic properties to install solar panels. And in fact, this is of relevance to the item we'll be considering in a bit.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Any other? Yep. Go ahead. Simone, yeah.
Just to say, I think the key issue here is that they applied under a certificate for lawfulness, which absolutely limits, had they applied as an application, the outcome would likely have been very different.
Okay, so there's a bit of a technicality there. Interesting to know. Yeah, Andrew, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a clarification required, really. So it's number 65, Brislington West, my ward. And so they made an appeal against a refusal delegate decision. The appeal was allowed. That happened on the 7th of April this year. What happens next? So we're now waiting for a decision on the appeal. So I'm just confused a bit by terminology.
Yeah, so the reference to the appeal being allowed means now essentially the appellant has planning permission, so they have been granted that on appeal, and the decision notice that has been provided by the inspectorate may include some planning conditions that they may need to comply with in the same way as when the planning authority issues decision notice. There are items there that sort of may need to be dealt with. So, yeah, the reference to the appeal being allowed essentially means that they now have planning permission for that.
Yeah, I was just a bit confused because the term appeal allowed means they're allowed to make an appeal, but it actually means that the plan permission has been granted. Yeah, thank you. Just a bit confusing. Sorry, my brain has switched off after a year of absence.
No worries. And I think if you go and look for the planning application for that address, you will find the decision notice from the planning inspectorate as well as the original decision notice from the Bristol City Council. Okay, any others on appeals? A longer section than I anticipated, but that's fine. Let's move on to enforcement. So this is to note recent enforcement notices, and of course we have had an enforcement update, 2nd of July. Has anyone got any comments about enforcement at this point? I would just like to, I mean, it seems to be a perennial, not request, but point to be made. I feel at this juncture that it does feel like it's still quite hard to grasp how we're doing in terms of enforcement and what our sort of relative status is compared to a different year, a different time period with these stats. And I appreciate that these stats do give you a picture about where we are in terms of number of cases, but it's that relative understanding that I think would help us, I think, a bit more. So I'm just going to put that out there again. Has anyone got any other comments on that?
I think, you make, Chairman, a very valid comment. At the end of the day, it's okay, useful to know the conduct current, but actually we want to compare with what we've done in the past.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to agree with both of you, really. Gosh, when does that happen? To say that, yeah, if we could have an equivalent period like last year, if we could have these stats for last year and just understand, is this an improvement? Is this kind of normal? What are we looking at? Because it's hard to get the context. It's really useful to get the sense of how many come through and then actually how many end up being served, because I think that's quite a eye-opening thing to get your head around, that there's a lot of work that goes in, and actually the number of notices that get served is quite small. But yeah, having that comparison as to whether we're making an improvement or what would be really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm not. Do officers have any comments on that?
Just to say that enforcement is definitely the area where we're still needing to make more improvement and where more work is still underway. We are also in the process of reviewing the local enforcement plan, updating it, so that will be going to the Economy and Skills Committee probably in the autumn. But as part of that, also looking at how can we better show you the outcome, so to speak, of all the activity. What I would say, though, as well, don't just look at the notices. The notices are almost some of the last resort. Wherever possible, we'll try and resolve things through negotiation or, encouraging retrospective planning applications where it can be resolved in that way. And it's also, sometimes we will be dealing with a very small number, but very, very, how can I say, high profile or high impact cases. So it's not just a quantitative thing, it's also a qualitative thing. And so we just still thinking about how can we better represent that.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else got anything on enforcement? Oh, yes, Andrew, go ahead.
Well, it's a bit of a tangent, actually, if that's allowed. I just wanted to ask Simone something, if that's possible. So when I was last on planning, we did have an enormous planning backlog, nothing to do with me, of course, but it was going down in the right direction. It was heading in the right direction. And, of course, we were in special measures. I'd really appreciate, as I'm newly back on planning, I'd appreciate a very brief update on where we are with backlog and the special measures.
Yeah, sure. So I would, in backlog terms, it's largely cleared. The latest official statistics were published on the 19th of June, which actually now also show that in statutory performance terms, we are well above the statutory target now. Fingers crossed, we'll get the positive decision from the minister any day now. For de-designation, because it's in his gift. There is no timescale. We had previously been told he would be making the decision fairly soon after the formal statistics would be published. So all in all, it's much, much, much better than it used to be.
Okay, thanks. That was helpful. Thanks, helpful question. Thanks for your responses, Simone. Let's move on to public forum. Well, we would move on to public forum, but there is no public forum because no one has submitted any. So that's agenda item 13 covered. So we're now on to what we class in the agenda as planning and development. And the first item is, and the only item tonight, is Clifton Local Listed Building Consent Order. So I assume I'm handing over to you, Pete, to give us a rundown of what that means.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. So what I've just prepared for you all is just a very brief presentation just to cover the main points in the report that was that you should have all had circulated. And this is trying to explain what this actually is, why we're doing it, and so forth. So a local listed building consent order grants consent for works as specified by the order, and in this case, it will grant consent for solar panels to be added to residential Grade 2 and Grade 2 star listed buildings within the Clifton Conservation Area. It's intended as a trial because we really like to roll this out across the city as a whole, because we don't want to see any barriers for the city to address its getting to carbon neutrality by 2030. As part of the creation of this order, we undertook a visual impact assessment because one of the things we had to be sure of that adding solar panels to these listed buildings wasn't going to cause what we, in the policy terms, cause harm to the heritage assets and their setting and the character and appearance of the conservation area and so forth. So we undertook that, and that was informed by the Clifton Conservation Area Character Appraisal from 2010, which identified some key views that we could use for that assessment process. That was very useful for us. This is the plan of the area that's going to be covered by the order. So essentially it's the red outline is the conservation area for Clifton, and what we've enabled for residents is this online map, and this is just a version of that. So it means that the actual properties that are covered by the order are shown in either green or orange. The green ones, when you click on the map, it will actually tell you the address and why they are covered by the order, and in this case it's because the type of roof that building has means that any solar panels added to that property wouldn't be visible from the street or anywhere else in the conservation area. The orange ones means that the conditions of the order need to be satisfied for you to be able to put solar panels on that property, for example here, and again it's because that roof form means that if you don't put the solar panels in exactly the right place, you would cause that visual harm. Elsewhere we've marked them as red because they won't be covered by the order because of either the land use type, they're going to be possibly commercial units, or where there is going to be a definite visual impact, and so you would still need listed building consent to add solar panels to these. I'll come on to some of the other property types that are not covered by the order in a minute, which is we covered by the public consultation component of this order. Then we have added the conditions of the order. Essentially, if you comply with those conditions, you can add solar panels to the roof without any problems. And just to point out that we've previously granted consent for solar panels on a listed building, or many listed buildings in Clifton, the conservation area, and the most recent one being this one at Caledonia Place, which was granted consent in February of this year. In order to progress the order, we had to put the order out for consultation for 28 days minimum, and so we did that between 31st of March 25 and concluded on Sunday the 27th of April 2025. We had 46 consultation responses, of which 39 were in support. And I'll just cover what were the main points from the neutral responses and the objections. One of the key aspects to note is the fact that Historic England support this order, so the fact they were convinced by our assessment of what harm that might cause the heritage, and they are very, the letter is published in full in the report, showing you exactly how much support they're giving to this order. Just to cover the concerns in terms of the neutral response, there were concerns about the governance of the potential visual impacts of the area and questions about the initial assessment process. A lot of that is covered either in the order, or some of these other concerns will be addressed by the guidance document that's going to be coming out alongside the order. The objections relate to potential visual impact of rooftop solar panels causing harm to the area, and as I pointed out, we've ensured that there will be no harm, otherwise this order wouldn't be able to be progressed, and Historic England wouldn't be supporting this. And there was an objection because churches were excluded from the order, and that's because churches are actually exempt from listed building consent. They have their own faculty consent process, so actually it's up to the diocese whether they would grant consent for the solar panels in those instances. Key issues is the principle is development appropriate, and essentially we're saying we need to get to carbon neutrality. The majority of the consultees are supportive. The concerns and objections are going to be addressed in the supporting guidance. And does the LLBCO sufficiently safeguard designated heritage assets within the area? And the conditions will enable that safeguarding to happen. And the order has the support of Historic England. So on that basis, we would like your support for this order to be progressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete. I've already got hands up. So we'll just have a time of asking any clarifying questions. Oh, wow, 4 hands. So I think I saw Richard, then Ellie, then Andrew, then Patrick.
I'll ask for a wee bit of a forbearance on the chairman's part, because I might as well kill two birds and say this seems to be a no-brainer and it has my full support, and I'm sure it will prove successful, and then hopefully it will be rolled out citywide, so that's good. 2 questions. I know the question, but just for transparency, Peter, can you confirm both local councillors are fully in support?
Indeed they are. We've had liaison with Paula O'Rourke and Jeremy as well from the local ward councillors, and in fact we also have a consultation response from a local councillor as well, so fully supportive of this order.
That's fine, thank you. My second question, and it may be in the report, if so I apologise if I've missed it. When's the assessment done? How successful the pilot's been, or otherwise, though I suspect it will be successful? And do we have any idea of how long it might take us to roll the scheme out?
It's one of the things I should have pointed out, I think it does say in the report, we're obliged to review the order every 12 months, and that's to ensure that there's not that harm, we're avoiding that harm to heritage assets. And the idea is that once we do that initial review after 12 months, that will help us inform how we're going to roll it out elsewhere. It is quite a lengthy process in doing that views assessment, and we benefit from the fact that Clifton has a conservation area character appraisal that has identified where that assessment should happen. It will be more difficult elsewhere. We'll have to start from scratch in some places where we'll have to work out where those views are. But I think once we've got this in place, we'll have a very strong basis to continue that work and move it on to the next areas.
Okay, Ellie, I think you're next.
Yeah, so 2 questions really. The first one, which I think is the simplest one, how does this affect the costs of installing? So I had some installed and had to apply for planning permission, and obviously that adds then to the cost. How does this come into that?
Well, that cost should go as a result of this order. So that should enable this to move people to be able to install these solar panels much easier without having to go through that planning process.
Excellent. That's what I was hoping you were going to say, but I just thought maybe I'd missed something. Because it does make a big difference. And then, so my other question is perhaps a bit more esoteric in that obviously this is weighing up the sort of harm to heritage in terms of the visual impact. And, you know, it's great to hear that you want to roll it out across the city, and obviously will contribute towards what we're trying to do with net zero. At what point do we say, actually, we need to move things quicker and have more of an impact, and actually the heritage, like, at what point do we stop? This is an extreme sort of way of putting it, but at what point do we stop caring about the visual impact and go, actually, we just need to, you know, improve how we're doing this because we're in a climate emergency. How, you know? I think
essentially we are in that position now, essentially. However, because of the statutory consultees, we need to be seen to be doing exactly what is right by the Planning Act, which means we have to safeguard the heritage, so we have to abide by National Planning Policy Framework and the like. So therefore, we have to go through these checks and balances to make sure we're doing it in the right way. What we're trying to do is actually speed up that process that we all want to see, make sure we are reducing those the impact on the climate. So, you know, I can speak from our team's perspective, and it's interesting the case about that appeals decision in C Mills. Essentially, we would have, you know, we wouldn't have seen a harm there because actually the public benefits of actually putting solar panels on a roof would outweigh that harm. So if it goes through that planning process, we can make that, or the applicant can make that argument, and we would accept it. So I think by and large we are getting there, but we have to abide by our statutory consultees and the Planning Act as it is.
Yeah, thank you. So in terms of if we wanted to up our game in terms of installing all that, it would be down to sort of central government policy and the planning policy to change.
Indeed, yeah. And the only way to bring this forward is through orders like this.
Thank you. Yeah, I had Zoe in a minute, but I've got Andrew, Patrick, then Zoe. All right.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much for your report, and I particularly love the map. It's covered in lots of orange, and normally that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned, but on this occasion not so good. So obviously there are lots of properties that have potential visual impact. And I asked this question actually in our agenda briefing, but so I'll ask it again in public. Obviously, you can get solar panels that are essentially invisible. So a lot of properties in this area have blue, grey, slate roofs. You can get tiles that look like pieces of slate. They're a lot more expensive at the moment. They're probably not as efficient. But I'm wondering if that could be encouraged as a way of getting more and more people through this process more quickly.
Yeah, and the guidance document does talk about different types of panels to try and encourage people to, where there is going to be a visual impact, to choose the type of panel that's not going to have that visual impact to make it easy to get this to building consent. But you're right, when you do go for some of those types of panels, they are less efficient. You don't necessarily get the full benefits from those particular types, the ones that look like slate, for example. So on the whole, the order and the map that's there will show you, should be able to help you by following the guidance, actually put the panels where there's not going to be any visual impact, whatever the type of panel you're putting on the roof. That's the idea.
Okay, Patrick, and then Zoe.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Freeman actually gazumped my question about the orders, but I was just wondering if I could clarify what the cost and time implications of conducting orders for the, the surveys for the visual impact across the rest of the city would be. I don't know how much the one in Clifton in 2010 cost, for instance.
well, that was the appraisal that we did, the conservation area character appraisal. So doing the other ones, well, this has also had benefit from the fact we had some support from University of West of England. A student was working with us to help us to undertake this, and so she did an amazing piece of work to actually produce that map and enable this to happen. In my ideal world, we would continue to have that kind of resource, so we can actually do this in other conservation areas and other parts of the city as a whole, actually. So not restricted to conservation areas. We should be looking at beyond conservation areas wherever there are residential listed buildings. So if we continue to get that UE support, I should imagine we better move this forward relatively quickly. But yeah. And just to cover, I mean, I did mention in the report, the reason why we've chosen Clifton is because there are 4,000 listed buildings in the city, and 25% of them are in that conservation area. So you've made a big impact just from doing that one area straight away.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick fires, if I could, please. Why are we excluding commercial properties from the order?
I think by and large, it's more difficult to work out what those impacts would be for a commercial property. I think for residential, it's likely the benefits are more easily assessed and understood. I think commercial property, and to be honest, in Clifton, there's not going to be many listed commercial properties up there. I think elsewhere in the city, we'll can take a view about how many commercial properties would actually benefit from solar panels on these roofs, and whether the order would be appropriate for those particular types of properties. But it just didn't work in Clifton as a property type.
Thanks. I get that we might not have many listed commercial buildings in Clifton or indeed the city, but it does seem strange to include a clause which explicitly excludes them rather than just not including that clause and letting companies install solar panels if they want to. My second question, which quickfire, was just going to be, why are we excluding properties which face highways from installing solar panels on the roofs facing the highways?
Well, that's part of the general permitted development order as a whole, actually, a lot of the time. Although, having said that, Sylvan Way, that would have been a permitted development. I think, by and large, that's to enable that we know there's not going to be any visual impact, because the aim of the order and the aim of the information that we've provided, it was to ensure that there's not going to be any visual impact, and yet still deliver on a huge number of solar panels being able to have consent.
Thank you. So, sorry, is that a national legislative blocker for us then, or is that part of the order that we've made here? Part of the national, at the national level, there are concerns that you would have those visual impacts would still be a concern. So we would not have the support from Historic England if we were saying blanket approach to solar panels on listed buildings in Clifton. So I'm going to drill onto this a bit more. So do we legally need to have the backing of Historic England in order to push this order through? Say we wanted to allow solar panels on highway facing roofs.
Just like with any listed building application, if we don't have Historic England's support, it has a risk of it being called in, and we would then potentially run the risk of not actually bringing this order forward as a whole. So we're much better to do this in collaboration with Historic England than do something that's going to be in conflict with them.
Thank you.
And if I could just add, sorry, I think, the order kind of as drafted, I think we feel sort of strikes an appropriate balance between kind of streamlining but also safeguarding kind of the heritage assets. And I'd also just add, in relation to commercial properties and also instances where we would have panels facing the highway, those would still be subject to a listed building consent application, but there isn't a fee for that. So, we would assess that in the normal way, and I'm sure if we felt there were potential amendments that were needed to kind of make an installation acceptable, we would kind of work with an applicant on that, kind of within the spirit of sort of what we're trying to do here.
So commercial, they are less encumbered by the current regulations, the commercial properties?
I think really, in terms of the order, what we find is when it comes to the residential properties, there are kind of more consistent sort of property types that sort of lend themselves to an order that kind of allows for this. Whereas with commercial properties, they kind of come in sort of many different forms, really. And I think just sort of sort of trying to introduce sort of something that covers all those kind of specifics is a challenge, I think.
Thank you. And sorry, if I may, one final quick fire question on the angling of the solar panels. I noticed that one of the stipulations is the solar panels have to be measured perpendicularly from the roof slope. If that roof is a flat roof, does that mean you're not able to angle the solar panels southwards, which would increase their efficiency?
That shouldn't be a constraint. No, that should be absolutely fine. Like I say, that was just a kind of guidance to say, like, you won't get that visual impact if you follow that approach. But if on a flat roof, you're going to be hidden by a parapet. There really wouldn't be an issue.
Okay. Thank you very much. And
no worries. Really, I just wanted to comment in line with some of the concerns that Councillor Ellie has already raised. Supposedly by 2050, parts of Bristol will be underwater due to climate change. And yet we're worried about being able to see solar panels from Street View. I think, we're going to I think the appearance of Clifton and the heritage sites within Clifton is going to be far worse if it's submerged underwater. And I appreciate there's nothing that we as a council can do without the support of the government. But I just wanted to really kind of note how ridiculous it is that essentially there are buildings out there that are eligible for solar panels and could go a long way towards mitigating the effects of climate change, that we can't because we can see them.
Okay, I think that was a point for debate, actually, more than a question of clarification, which is noted and agreed to by me anyway, at least. Any other questions of clarification that we've got about this? I did have one. What was my question? Yeah, I guess it is relating to a little bit what Zoe and Ali have been saying. It's just like, is there scope to sort of expand the scope of this in the future? Like, can we review this order, or how does that work in practice?
That's the idea. We review the order in 12 months, and therefore either amend this current order, which we'll take a view on that. But the idea is to review it and then think about how we would roll it out as a part of that review process.
Okay, thanks. Okay, another quick question from Andrew, and then we'll move on to debate.
Yeah, just on Zoe's point, actually. I mean, we're kind of like coming up with this order because we all think that solar panels are ugly, but actually they're not particularly ugly, and from a distance they just look like a Velux window, so why are we so desperate for not to be seen? Yeah, that was the first point. There wasn't a point, but I've forgotten it. My brain's gone dead, so sorry about that. It was quite a good point, actually. Never mind.
It'll come to you in a second, I'm sure, Andrew. Okay, well, let's start the debate with Andrew's point then. Go on.
Are we going to measure the success of this consent order by the number of applications that come in, or the number of people who then get solar panels on their rooftops? Are we going to be measuring that in any way?
It would be one of the measures. I think what I'd like to see is coming back to what Councillor what Ellie said, but really it was about how what's the public perception of this, so that we can say, actually, this has changed the way in which people are actually putting these solar panels on their roofs. There are some obvious constraints in Clifton. A lot of the properties are in multiple occupancy or divided up into flats, which makes the kind of practicalities of actually putting solar panels on the roof sometimes a little bit more complicated beyond the planning world. So it's in terms of numbers, I don't think that would be a fair assessment if that was where we were judging it in 12 months' time. I think we'd have to think about how we're doing that evaluation a bit more nuanced, I think.
Okay, is this a question or a... Yeah, go on then.
I was just wondering if we're going to make any effort to actively promote it to residents. We've now got this, you don't have to pay for planning. Yeah.
We'll try and work in partnership with our Sustainable Cities team as part of the Green Deal and the whatever it's called in the West. There's a project at the moment going on between us and Baines where we're looking at trying to do more retrofit for all historic buildings, not just listed buildings, but more across the whole of the city and the region. So we'll try and use that as a kind of way of promoting it.
Have you got another question, Patrick? This is the last question, okay? Thank you.
It's a very quick one. I suspect I know the answer. Are we able to vote to amend this at all, and take any parts out or put change any stipulations at all at this stage?
This has gone through quite a lot of lengthy legal kind of looking at the kind of nuts and bolts of it. So I think if you were going to make any amendments, we'd have to take that away and get a legal view on that, which would then delay bringing this through. I'm not quite sure how we progress this, and we're quite keen to move quite quickly on this. But unless there were serious amendments, in which case we would get that legal view. Yeah.
Thank you. So let's move on to debate. Has anyone got anything they want to say about this and discuss it? Okay, Debbie, go on. Yeah.
I am delighted to see this motion, this item come through DCA. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction in getting us to be carbon neutral by 2030. So I think it's really great. I think we've all highlighted areas where we think it could be improved, but hopefully with government cooperation that can be something that will eventually happen. So I will be voting in favour of this item.
Thank you, Zoe. Yep, Katya, go ahead.
Personally, I think this is a no-brainer. As you said, Bristol might be underwater. I'm not sure when, but the climate emergency will create far more worse things to think about than the visual impact, and the fact that these things can actually go on now and not cause damage to the buildings if people are really that worried about it. And when in future we have better technology to make them more hidden, then we could do that. But we should have put them on 5 years ago, from my point of view. So I'll be voting for this.
Thank you, Katya. Looks like we're going down the line here a bit. Go for it, Mal. Oh, yeah.
Energy prices absolutely soaring. I think it makes sense to do this, and it also takes off the strain from that housing. So yeah, no, that's great, and I'll be voting for this.
Thanks, Al. We don't have to go around in that order. Just if anyone wants anything else has anything else they want to say. Yeah, go on, Andrew. Yeah.
I think we should probably just move to the vote. I think it's pretty straightforward. I'm not trying to predetermine anyone's decision here, but just to make a flippant point, which I often like to do, if Bristol is underwater, I think Clifton will be okay. So we can all breathe. Their solar panels will be all right. So.
Okay. So I'm just going to make one last comment, which is I do note Historic England's comments, and I think it's interesting what they've said. And I'm going to read it out, actually, because I think it was interesting to read. Historic England supports the principle of the order, which is, in a small way, quite a small way, I think we'd agree, may help to address the climate crisis. Climate change is one of the most challenging issues of our time, with potential negative consequences for both people and heritage. It is both an immediate challenge and a long-term one. Historic England strongly supports urgent climate action and crucially believes that heritage is part of the solution. And I took that to mean not just that in this instance heritage is being used in a new way to obviously install solar panels, but also that of course heritage means that we already have a built form. We don't have to build new buildings. We want to maintain the buildings we have because that's the sustainable thing to do. So I think they're not the bad guys. I think they're doing a good job. It's very hard to balance, as we've discussed, the aesthetics that we might think is a peripheral issue with what is a very, very demanding and challenging time to get all this stuff done in the time that we have available. But I do think that this is the best we could hope for at this point, and I think the officers and Pete and everyone has done a great job in putting this together, and so I'll be supporting it. Can I suggest that I move this order? I think the recommendation is on the screen, that the Clifton Local Listed Building Consent Order is adopted as at Appendix 1. I think Andrew got there for you there this time, Richard. Richard, usually you're the.
Who was it?
It was Andrew. I think he's a keen bean. He's back. He's back in the fold. He wants to be the seconder. Let's let him do it. Okay. So as is normal on this committee, and sorry if you didn't know this in advance, but I like to do things in a slightly random order so that we do this in an impartial way. So, I've left myself off that. Let's just go back. Hold on a minute. So what we're going to do is just go around and you're going to say whether you're in favour or against or abstain. So first of all, Councillor Russell.
In favour.
Councillor Freeman.
In favour.
Councillor Eddy.
Favour.
Councillor Hornchin.
In favour.
Councillor Breyer, that's me. In favour. Councillor Pete.
In favour.
Councillor Al-Maghrabi.
Like in favour.
Councillor Varney.
In favour.
Councillor McAllister. So that is passed unanimously. Thank you everyone for your time today. The next meeting, I think I'm right in saying, is on the 13th of August. And that concludes today's meeting. Thank you everyone.